I'm Theron Ramacharaka. With this video here, oh geez, maybe I should have written a script for this, but it's a complicated subject here. I've been asked, maybe a week ago, to expand on some information that I gave in another video. Let me get rid of this gum. In that video, that former one to which I just referred, I forget what it's called, but I largely lay out what the acronym Makes It a Power Act means. I unpack that acronym. And I was asked in a comment, maybe it wasn't a comment, maybe it was an email from a viewer, a subscriber here, to expand on that. And I replied, well, yeah, let me submit that to my subconscious mind and see what comes up. And I added most of the rest of the material here on this channel that has to do with any practical instruction, as well as theory and practice, instruction, the William Walker Atkinson narrations, other narrations, and my own material, my own creative material here, does expand on that. But let me submit this to my subconscious mind to see if I can expand on it more directly. Okay, I also uploaded some material on problems in self-mastery, in which I indicated that a comprehensive approach must be taken. I have made some other indications here and there that I like. So, for example, I've wanted to stay away from any kind of religious talk or spiritual path talk because I want this material to apply to everybody. This is a complicated subject. I just now uploaded a video called Thought Control. It's, I believe, chapter 18 from L.W. de Lawrence's 1914 published book called The Master Key. The chapter, again, is Thought Control, what it can do for you. A comment showed up under it. It's more complicated and difficult than that. Well, it's a good comment. It's a good observation. I agree with it. Now, I put that together, that comment, that observation, together with my request, the request made of me a few weeks ago to expand on Makes It a Power Act. And the result is now this video. Now, number one, all mental discipline training, all personal evolvement work is difficult. It need not be difficult with respect to the instruction. It may be complicated, it may be complex with respect to the theory behind it. It may be complex to lay out a program and difficult to lay out such a program that's going to work, that's real, that's bona fide, and is going to be even more difficult to do the work if done earnestly and in such a way that it's going to produce the result, the intended result. I'm better. My gift in life, I have numerous gifts. talents, probably the greatest one that I have, is providing, is putting together and providing for you this material. I believe that I am more gifted in that than I am accomplished in following, than putting it to use in my own life. I have put it all to use. I have tested all the material that I present here. I have made a life out of approximating the results by way of using the techniques and the methods. I have developed a new way of being through it, but it's always a work in progress. Heck, when I had my initial Theron Ramacharaka channel, at one point I quit smoking cigarettes, and I posted a video or two about that. But I'm back to smoking cigarettes right now. So, if you were to go to a foot doctor and his feet stink, would you lose faith in that foot doctor's help? Maybe. Well, what if he said that due to his knowledge and his experience with podiatry, he has saved his feet from having to be amputated? That conditions were much worse. All that's left now is some foot odor, bromidrosis. He's got it narrowed down to that. Then you might be very impressed with his own progress using what he knows. Well, my life is sort of like that. So here I am, smoking, which is not a good thing to do for many reasons. Perhaps if you knew my starting point, you'd overlook it. It doesn't, what I'm trying to say here is I'm not perfect. And I don't expect you to be either. I expect you to give this your utmost attention, this material, and to do it, to pursue it the best you can, and always improve in your capability to do that. And if you do pursue it earnestly, you will improve in your capacity to pursue it earnestly. Okay. So that having been said, I mean that's actually part of the video here. This is a complex matter. Engaging in thought control, your own thought control alone, well, yeah. Personal involvement and self-mastery, overcoming negative influences, powerful negative influences that would keep us from pursuing such things, requires more than just one approach, one thing, focusing on one thing. That acronym makes it a power act. Just the existence of it should point that out. Thought control is just one element in there. So, if I'm to expand on that, I have to give a lot more background information before I even get to it. I wanted to stay away from the spiritual path or any religious talk. Well, that makes things a little bit more difficult for me to put stuff together. I have to come up with information for you that doesn't involve that kind of talk. Well, a lot of such information does involve that kind of talk. I have great respect for the ancient yogic system of personal involvement, self-actualization. Great respect for it. But it's a spiritual path. It's pretty hard to lay it out, except for certain elements of Raja Yoga, which has to do with mental discipline. It's the mental discipline emphasis side or aspect of the overall yogic system. So I cannot lay out here that this is not a yoga channel. It's not. But some references to Raja Yoga, some material from Raja Yoga is used here. It's very effective, but without occurring in the as part of the whole yogic system. Well, in not doing that, then I have to get other stuff put together here. No single thing, no single aspect of a bona fide personal evolvement toward true selfhood ultimately is going to do much for you. No. Such that, for example, here, engaging in learning methods of thought control, you're probably going to fall way short in what can be done. The full potential of such training and practice can actually do, because other things have to work into it. Other things have to work into it. So a comprehensive approach is needed. Well, then you run into complications with that too. What's more important? What parts of that, what elements of that comprehensive approach should come first? Which ones are more important? Which ones may be grouped under other ones or in with other ones? Well, I'll tell you this. If there's any one element that is necessary for all the others, it would be attention control. So if you think that you have pretty darn good control over your attention right now, well, try applying that level of control that you currently have to all the work here and see how well that works for you. Distraction. If you don't have outer distractions coming into your senses, you're going to have inner ones pop up. They will. They will pop up. All sorts of things may get in the way. You may come to think that you just don't have time for all this. That is more difficult than you thought. You may get off into believing that you're doing the work, but then somehow feel like you're kind of like pretending. Your false ego may get in the way. All of these things have to do with how you're focusing your attention, as well as the content of your thought. Those two go hand in hand. Attention control itself is a matter the power to focus your mental attention is the power to do that is will. But is developing will, your use of will, power alone, going to have great benefit in your life? Is it going to do the whole trick? Is it enough for you to be able to, is ironclad will enough for you to overcome a severe drug addiction? No, it's not. Almost never. In fact, anybody who says, well, I just used my will, my power of will, they probably aren't aware of what else they used. And then recognize whatever other faculties came into play. But development of the power of your use of the power of will, your individual connection and access to the universal will, power of will grid out there, in there, whatever. To do that, it's extremely important for all the rest, including control of attention. All elements of this are important, and they all assist each other. They're all, makes it a Power Act as an acronym that breaks down or unpacks into all the necessary conditions. In my opinion, there are probably more. All the necessary factors involved in this whole thing here. The sufficient condition, necessary conditions being things that are required. But just those alone aren't enough either. You also have to throw in the sufficient condition, which means all that it takes to make something happen, to bring something about. The sufficient condition is that you, let me word this exactly as I have it here. The sufficient condition is doing the work as is prescribed it to be done, and that involves doing it earnestly. The more earnestness that you put into it, the more earnestly you go about this, the greater the result. Let's say quantitatively. The quality of the result will be determined by your motives going into it and throughout it. So motives are a very important aspect of the whole thing. And in my opinion, a close examination and refinement of your motives for doing this, for engaging in all of this, is a requirement early on. How often do you hear about that? You go to a weekend seminar on personal development. The teacher, the guru, the guide, the trainer might, have everybody, have all the attending people, the pupils, introduce themselves, a 30-second introduction, and why they're here. State why they're here, what they want to get out of this. You might even have a little worksheet. Here are my reasons, here are my goals. Let's clarify our goals, a little goal speech, maybe a little motivational speech, and then that's it. I have an in-depth approach to that. To get through it, if somebody were to come to me and say, hey, I want you to guide me through this whole affair, beginning to end. So we take the formal approach, and when I put them to the task of this motive thing, getting that laid out and done first, it takes about 8 weeks. 8 steps, 8 major steps. And then that becomes backdrop against which all the rest is done. The context in which all the rest is done. So that by the time as the progress is made, and by the time it's all said and done, it never really is done, but the motives are built right into a person's new way of being. They work hand in hand with the will and the desire, the two, as William Walker Atkinson calls them, the two mentative poles, which are necessary for one another. So we have to address both of those too. Motives get built right in, inscribed upon your will, and become a major consideration in which you engage every day as a new habit. You see, this is a complicated affair. And for someone to design their own personal evolvement lifestyle and manage it can be a very daunting enterprise. I mean, how would you come up with such a thing before you've already done it? How would you know how to do that? How would you know what's required? How would you know how to organize it? What if you have, what if through pain you come to the decision that you should do something like this? Well, where do you find the right material in the first place? Do you have enough control over your attention to do that already? This is a daunting matter, and it's also an extremely important matter at this point in human development, which is not really development. I don't think so. A comprehensive approach is required. It has to involve all areas of your life. Do you even know what all the areas of your life are that should be addressed? Creating personal change really is an extremely difficult thing to do. Do you know the fundamentals of overcoming a bad habit? Just that. Do you? How successful are you at it? Look at me. I've been investigating this material and applying it to the best of my ability most of my life. Here I am smoking again. That doesn't mean that I have fallen short in all areas just because of this. No, it has its impact in a lot of areas. Yes. Have I recognized the true self? My share of true selfhood? Yes. Have I realized it in my awareness? Yes. Am I fully manifesting it? No. I'm working on it. I have crossed that line over into true selfhood to some extent. I have had personal experience with my true self. This is still a work in progress. Now, another thing. I want all of this material to be safe for you to pursue. Well, that has to count out some things. I believe that the main thrust of that little area of yoga called Kundalini yoga is important. It has to do with the energy body. And if pursued by itself, or in the context of the larger yogic system, it can produce wonderful results. But going at it by itself, or in the context of other methods, without a guide who has gone through it, who has, let's say, mastered it, can be dangerous. A lot of New Age talk and information will shoot you straight into the practice of Kundalini yoga. And I'm not so sure that either the people who present that material are aware of certain of the dangers or care about them. Maybe they just want to sell their material. And I'm not so sure that whoever takes up with such practice as provided is aware or cares. Maybe they go about it carelessly. Here on my channel, this material here, in my initial channel, I laid out step-by-step procedures. I developed playlists, multiple playlists, like maybe 20 videos in a row. Here, step by step, do these steps. I couldn't put it all in one video. I had to break it into smaller ones. Well, you know what? When people click on videos on YouTube, they cherry pick. They'll take things out of sequence. They may think, well, I can skip that. Whereas that may be getting a firm grip on that they're going to skip because it doesn't look interesting, or it seems like something they already did that. It may be prerequisite to engage in that to a certain degree of advancement in it before what follows will have its most efficient result. But people will skip things. They'll take things out of sequence. So here on this channel, I'm not going to give step-by-step procedures. Maybe in one video, yeah, here are some steps. Here's the sequence to do some little thing, to develop some technique. But video after video after video in a certain sequence takes a lot of work on my part. And in large, people will ignore that sequence. So there's another difficulty here in this channel. What this really comes down to is that you have to become familiar with all the material here and then create your own program. But you should know some of the rules in order to do that most efficiently for you. And I'm not going to include things like Kundalini Yoga. Just minimally. Things that I feel certain are safe for you to pursue, even if you just cherry pick right into that and ignore everything else on the channel. Let's take a look at Makes It a Power Act. Again, with a little more explanation of each part of it. Makes It a Power Act. It's an acronym setting forth at least some of the necessary conditions for personal evolvement and self-mastery, as I see it. Now, I don't want to forget this. Sense of humor is not included in this. I didn't know where to put that. Makes it a power act. All the letters are already used up for other things. Wait a minute. Okay, yeah, I added it into the very last, the T in the word act. I did. I added that in there. Okay. All right. So there we go. All right. It's there. Okay. Makes. M.A.K.E.S. Motives. The M. Motives. Right and evolved motives. What do I mean by right evolved motives? Well, I could go ahead and lay out the whole sequence of things to do for that. But that's a separate video. Or pair of videos, like part 1 and part 2. Another problem here is if a video gets too long, like this one probably will, people will not listen to it. Some may say, well, that's because they're lazy, or they just can't, focus very long. People have attention deficit disorder. Maybe it's also because they just don't have time. What am I going to do? If I make a part 1 and a part 2 and a part 3, Well, then people will cherry pick. They might just jump to part 3. What am I going to do? What are we going to do here? This takes your attention. It really does. Some level of progress in your life with all of these things is required right from the start. This may not be for everybody. A person who cannot focus at all will greatly benefit from at least the attention control aspect of all of this. But if they can't focus on the instruction for it, well, then there's a problem. Right motives, evolved motives. Motives are a deep thing within us. They're rooted in desire. So I could talk about desire too here. But I include references to desire elsewhere. And motives is deep enough because once the work with motives is done, as I have not laid it out here yet, but will, we pretty much take care of desire. But let me tell you just a couple core desires that everybody has, or almost everybody. We desire love. This is a core root desire that roots right into the true self. Love. Another one is the desire for consciousness. Greater consciousness. Another one is to, well, these two kind of dovetail right in with, development. Becoming more than what you are. Things have an inner push for that. Now, some get this all mixed up and turned backwards. Well, there's some refinement then needed, isn't there? Some people don't even know what their motives are for much of anything, let alone for engaging in such a personal regime. It's a good idea to get really clear on them and make sure that they are clearly stated, precisely stated, affirmatively stated, true, ethical, universalized, so that they don't need to be refined, rewritten, rethought every day, so that so that they will apply to everything, of universal application, idealized, so that they don't have to be, revised constantly, embedded on our will, and so forth. Motives. The reasons why. And, the reasons why you would want to engage in this. Well, that has a snowball effect on itself. You build your motives into this, well, then you begin to live out your motives. And so the quality of your motives in the first place is very important. And the motives are very deeply seated. Once this is said and done, once the process has gone through for refinement, this is part of your personal refinement, because these are very deeply set. Right? And evolved motives. I mean, if these are your reasons, well, then they should be highly evolved in the first place. Another thing about motives, well, they have to be motivating. It can't be just goals that you come up with. Like, well, I want to be a better person. Is that motivating for you? Really? It can be for some people. But these motives have to have, for them to actually be motives rather than simple goals, they have to have enough emotional content in them to make them important enough to put you into action. They have to motivate you to act. If you have what you might call motives that don't have that element, then you may give up shortly after you start this whole thing. Because you're not truly motivated. And at really difficult points in your progress with the rest of this, you may give up because the motives aren't strong enough. Sometimes you'll have to really rely on your motives to pull you through. There, I've said a bit more about motives. I've expanded on it. M.A.K.E.S. The next letter is A. That stands for awareness. There we go with the consciousness thing right there. A feeling of awareness. Okay, aware of what? Pretty much everything around you, everything you're doing. The environment in which you are doing this, the world environment, the human condition. A feeling of subtle energy changes. This is very important. Aware of subtle energy changes within you. Such as those subtle energy changes created by the meanings of words. And the workings, you have to be aware of the workings of fundamental laws. There's a lot more to say about that too. But right here, with respect to awareness, I'm talking about the feeling of subtle energy changes that come from awareness of the workings of fundamental laws. Very important. Had you thought of that? I'm trying to bring, right here, I'm bringing this thing about awareness to your awareness. Right here again, I'm thinking about that comment made under my video, thought control. Well, yeah. It's not all that just simple, and easy. No, there's more. Here's one of the more. With respect to fundamental laws, we also want to apply not just be aware of them. And how do you pick which ones? How do you which fundamental laws? Where do you find out about them? I've found lists of over 100. But I also discovered that they can be boiled down to a few. Which ones are the most fundamental? And if we're talking about the workings of fundamental laws, well, they should be fundamental. Universal laws. Cosmic operational principles. The principles are slightly different than the laws themselves. Like we may have the law of opposites, and the operational principle in it is polarity, let's say. The principle of polarity. Another way to look at it is the fundamental law of opposites. Polarity is a bit more of a working thing than opposites. Two different ways to look at the same thing. So we want to become aware of these laws, recognize them at work in what we're doing. We also want to gear up what we're doing to work in harmony with them. In fact, we want to apply them in what we're doing, and then intend them to be at work in what we're doing, and feel the subtle energy changes that all of that awareness makes. Experience them at work and apply them intentionally, and will for them to have the maximum effect, and will for you to be aware of it all. Awareness. This includes what I call field thinking. You can feel thoughts. You can become aware of the subtle energy changes that every thought has. This is important for self-mastery. If you want to gain control over your thoughts, thought control, I think it would be a good idea to become aware of and learn to manage the subtle energy changes of your thoughts. Awareness. How about K in M.A.K.E.S? There I refer to Kundalini control and upper chakra opening. Safely. Not just cherry pick and jump into it and buy some New Age book at the local metaphysical bookstore, or find some information on the internet and just go at it. No, the rest of this is required to go with it. I'm not going to say any more about that right now. M.A.K.E.S. E. Entities, including thought forms. I posted a pair of videos that are long about thought forms already here. Thought forms are what that author, who I narrated, calls artificial thought forms. Entities. All the universe is alive. And depending on how you look at it, everything is an entity. Everything natural is an entity in itself, a being. Well, and they all interact somehow, however remotely. Some work against us very seriously, and becoming awareness again of that, is vital. So if you wonder why I post videos about the human condition, this is why. The human condition and entities, well, they have a close relationship. Entities, again, it includes removing entity attachments. This is something that some people don't know about. Many people don't know about. We seem to act like glue for entities. We're parasitic. That are parasitic. Look, you don't believe in that? All the universe is alive. Okay, can you accept that? Okay. There's also one of these other fundamental laws is the law of analogy. I'm not talking about literary analogy. Literary analogy is a single aspect of a greater law of analogy, which is universal. As above, so below, whatever. Okay? Things repeating at various different levels of operation, of manifestation. So if we have parasites in the physical world, at whatever level of observation, microscopic, up to gastrointestinal parasites. People who feed off others' energy. Psychopaths. Okay, so if at all levels of the physical plane, gases, liquids, solids, whatever, and on, by way of the law of analogy, there are parasites at all levels of manifestation. It's a pretty good idea to be aware of that if we're taking a comprehensive approach here, because we'll be dealing with all planes of our own being. M.A.K.E.S, the last letter, S. To that I ascribe subconscious programming. Subconscious, S. This is vital. Vital. If you don't get your subconscious mind involved here, efficiently, effectively and efficiently, I consider efficiently to involve effectively. It also means as expeditiously as possible. Expeditious and effective. Efficient. You're not going to have the greatest efficiency. You're going to have very little efficiency with all the rest of this if you do not get your subconscious mind involved and know how to do it. Be aware of it. Approach it with the right motives. It, in makes it a power act. I, in it. Information. Or, as the Buddhists call it, right knowledge. One of the Four Noble Truths, isn't it? In Buddhism. Such as knowledge of the absolute. I could go on and on about that. There will be videos about it. William Walker Atkinson in Arcane Teaching. Very good information concerning the absolute. We could call it source. Seems to be a New Age term for it. God. I'm not talking about the Old Testament notion of God. That's such a big subject. I can't really say more about it right here. This is going to be a long enough video. Right knowledge, such as of the absolute, fundamental laws, and of the environment in which we strive towards self-mastery, and of opposing forces to our work. Right knowledge. Also, this is, I take it to be, right knowledge, this whole video. Another thing about right knowledge in such a program, this is, okay, right knowledge, that refers to maybe the conceptual side, right? The conceptual side. There's also, there has to be the practical instruction side, the things to do. Well, your knowledge has to be instrumental, efficiently instrumental to the things to do. So, what knowledge? There's a lot of armchair speculation. There's a lot of information. But it may not help you to do anything. Then again, it may also, some of that, whether some information is going to be useful or knowledge is going to be useful toward action, toward practical application, may depend on how you interpret that. My job here is to present it so that You don't have to think that through very far. I like to do the thinking for you on these matters. Make this as simple as I can. But then again, I run into these other problems here on YouTube, right? Presenting this information, making it suit everybody. Well, it doesn't suit everybody. It's not going to suit anybody fully. Because I have potentially a world audience. Everybody has his own starting point. Everybody has his own mental filters. Everybody has his own self-deception going on. And people cherry pick. But right knowledge is key. And it must be useful. It must be able to easily translate into action. People may say, well, that's just theory. What do I do with it? Well, I like to make it pretty clear what to do with it. But if I narrate something from William Walker Atkinson, it may raise question. Okay, that's fine and dandy, but what do I do? That's just a bunch of yakety yak. I can't say everything in 5 minutes. I have over 70 videos here uploaded within like 3 weeks now. This is a new channel. And I'm not done, not near done. Not near done. There's no end to it. It's a complex matter. So sometimes I lay out things and it stands alone at that time. While I'm putting it together, while I'm uploading it, and while you're listening to it. But I can't include everything about it right then and there. This involves me and you working together on this whole thing, which is pretty difficult to do, video per video here, with you watching one while you're making dinner. Get my point. Right now is vital here. Now, the second letter in it, true. T, it's the T, it, T, true selfhood. Oh boy. I can't expand a heck of a lot on that. I can say this T includes control from our individual locus of being. And consciousness expansion of that awareness and control into the universal locus of being. When people say consciousness expansion, I don't know if they know what they mean. I think people mean many different things by it. I'm trying to get at something very fundamental and core here with this. This uses the term T, true selfhood, not false ego selfhood. Includes control here. What we're after, one of the main things we're after is control of all of this material, right? Management of this material and practice, as well as control over our energy and our experience in the cosmos. From our individual locus of being, the true self. And then not just all of this as a little individual section of true selfhood, but conscious or aware expansion of that into the universal selfhood of which our individual true self is a part. It's very important because right in there with that universal locus of being is universal will. Pretty good idea to get an increasing sense of an actual flow of universal will to work through us. Makes it attention control. There. Moving on. Power. P. Physical. Well, this has to do with our entire physical being. Physical body, for example. Physical control, including right-left brain balance. Well, I don't spend a lot of time talking about right-left brain balance. There's controversy and there's developing notions. There are developing notions over the functions of the right and left hemispheres of the brain. What I'm largely talking about here are the faculties that we associate with both sides. You know, one side or the other. Like logical sequence and language on one hand, and non-linguistic, intuitive, whole picture work, you know, or functions on the other hand. I don't care which side of the brain, really. What we're after is an integration of these faculties to work together. Many people are lopsided with it. They don't have much control over it either. But insofar as as our mental operations have the brain, the physical component to them, and by the way, that's no cheap thing to say. That's not some thing to say, oh yeah, well, you know, those who boil things down to just the brain, well, they're messed up. No, that's very important to recognize and acknowledge that there's more than the brain going on. But that there is brain going on too. I mean, the central nervous system is vital to be aware of. In fact, did you know that yoga, the physical side of yoga, hatha yoga, that is actually the first step in Raja Yoga. And all the asanas, mudras, and bandhas that go with hatha yoga, really? I mean, they have to do with physical health, relaxation, all of these side benefits. Yes. But one of the core functions of all of that is to prepare your central nervous system for what's to follow. And the central nervous system, from our perspective here, in the physical plane, is its physical component, the nervous system. In large, the brain. Physical. This will also include things like physical health, which I'm violating with smoking. Admittedly. It has to do with diet as well. What food you eat, how you eat it. I made a video already about getting the maximum vril, life force, vital force, prana out of your food. Well, that has its physical component. It's a physical action. It's also a mental one. Whatever ties into the physical plane of our being is what I'm referring to here. Physical. And gaining control over it. And of course, being aware of it, feeling the subtle energy changes, having the right and evolved motives involved, being aware of entities, subconscious programming. You see all these fit in together. They work together. Pulling one out and talking about it, well, that's the only way to do this. But then it may seem like I'm not talking about, I'm not mentioning all the other aspects. Well, I can't do it all at once. And you cannot address them all at once in learning about it and applying it. But all of these must be working together too. This is part of the complexity. And they should all help develop each other. Each one should help develop all the others in a cumulative fashion. Techniques, little specific individual techniques built into methods of action, which in large will include multiple techniques working together into, like you may have 3 techniques that combine together and form one method of action. And the methods of action build into a way of being. This is a simple way I have of describing the process. I have others, but that's one. Techniques build methods of action, build a new way of being. What's next? Power. O. Observation. Well, all of our senses, physical, mental, and otherwise, take in information. But we want to be able to do that. We want to be able to do that effectively, efficiently. We want to be able to select what comes in, count some things out. Well, this involves awareness then, doesn't it? Selecting and bringing in information as accurately as possible. This includes the mental senses. What's a mental sense? Well, here's the easy one to talk about. Vision. We have a physical sense of vision, right? The eyes do the work there. But we also have a mental one, creating mental images. I can look at the camera here and then close my eyes and still picture. That's now using my mental sense of vision. Now, yeah, there may be a residual image left from the physical one, but, okay, here's another one. I'll close my eyes here. I was looking at the camera. Yeah, I still see that residual image, but now I'm picturing my automobile. There. Mental sense of vision. Well, I want to be careful about what I image mentally. I want to select. I want my mental images to be as accurate as possible. I may want to use them creatively. It's pretty hard to think without mental images. Mental imagery may be more important than you think. Well, that's part of our observation. That one aspect of mental imaging is the observation of it. Also, with respect to the physical senses, we want to be able to, we want to select what we let in. Gain better control over that, but then that requires attention, doesn't it? Attention control. Moving on, the W in power, will. We want to engage in will development. Will is the power we have to do the rest, and desire works hand in hand with that. Will. Now, does this mean just dig in our heels and we can do anything? No. More is involved. Will on itself may not be enough. In fact, we want to have control over the subtle energies, right? This thing called prana. Will itself doesn't do anything. I can will to move my arm and it still doesn't move. I can will all I want. I can have motive upon motive, but the actual thing that's going to make the muscles go is that vital force. It must be moved. It has to move. It has to flow. It has to do something. Well, will drives it. Will is the power. The movement of the will is the action. And the more we allow universal will to work through, well, the greater access we have to our use of that power of will. The more we are connected to the grid of will. Will is will wherever it shows up. Your will, my will, it's all will. It's all part of the universal grid. And if we don't, if we run against universal will enough, we're going to get shut off and a very weak will. Another thing about will development is if we will to do something and then we don't do it, we weaken our use of it. So part of developing will is to be careful what we will to do. Be careful what we will to think. Be careful what we will to feel. Just become more aware of will and what we're willing, and then do it. And we're responsible for what we do with it. The E in power, emotional control. Somebody recently mentioned it to me that impulse control is very key here. Well, that, of course, is a combination of some of these other things, including emotional control. I mean, impulse, one way to talk about that is that it comes about through involuntary acts of will based on some emotional appeal. Well, there's a complex statement right there. Emotional control is part of it. It's not enough to do it by itself. No, the rest is necessary. The R in power is rational thinking. Okay, so let's say we're very good at accurately bringing in information. And we're very good at getting into action. Our action is going to ultimately be based on whatever information is brought in, whether it's from our true self or from the world. We're always acting on information brought in. Well, between the bringing of it in, however selected or accurate it is, in order to engage in action that is most conducive to our personal development, we have to be able to think rationally about it. We have to be able to cognize, perceive, not just sense, but perceive and cognize and decide upon that material, that information, rationally. Understanding how rational thinking occurs may not occur to some people, come to their awareness again, as a necessary tool here. But it is. So what about if a person cannot think rationally? What if they are almost always in a psychotic state, or they're highly irrational? How can they go about this? Yes, this would help them, but they have to have a certain level of rational thinking going in the first place in order to get going with it. The human condition, with respect to some people, is terrible. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm being realistic. And I don't know where you stand with any of it. I don't know what your state of affairs is at the moment. I don't know. And I have to be careful what information I put out here, which necessarily leaves some out that could be here. All information in the world could be put here. And then, we make the best out of all of it or something like that. But I have to cherry pick in the provision of this information. I put a lot of thought into this stuff, folks. I've tried to rethink rationally about it. This is my gift to you. Okay, we have one word left. ACT. A-C-T. A. Atmosphere. Personal atmosphere. How we interface with others. Now, this occurs at all levels of our being. I'm not just talking about how we greet them verbally. I'm talking about body language. I'm talking about mental vibration. How we interface with others at all of its levels. Personal atmosphere. I didn't say just physical. I'm talking about it at all levels. Our energy aura. Telepathy. Telecommunication. Body language. And so on. Good idea to be aware of these things, right? And have right motives involved. Maybe use some subconscious programming to assist us. Attention to it. Will development in connection with it. Emotional control. Rational thinking involved. All of this works together, remember? No single part of this will have much of an efficient effect in your life without the rest. The C in ACT. Creativity, creative thinking. This includes, back to mental images and putting them to use creatively. There are tools of creative thinking involved. Imagination is part of creative thinking. The root word in imagination is image. This gets into willpower then too. And all the rest. And finally, thought. T. ACT. T. Thought. Now, we already talked about attention control. The ability to focus our attention on, let's say, a thought. But we also have to be careful what thoughts we have. We have to select. Well, that's thought content. It's very important. I think that is addressed in that video I just uploaded. Thought control. Yeah. But is thought control going to reach a high level of efficiency without the rest of this? No. No. How about without right and evolved motives? No, it's not going to be efficient. You can run into dangerous territory because you don't have the right motives involved. And if you don't know how to apply those motives to your thought content, you're at a loss again. You're going to fall short. You can get down some wrong paths this way. Thought content includes sense of humor. My take on all of this is that I have identified most of the core necessary conditions. The necessary conditions for personal evolvement and self-mastery, ultimately toward the recognition, the realization, and the manifestation of true selfhood. These are elements involved. The sufficient condition is doing the work. There. I have expanded on it. Makes it a power act. Why power? The acronym worked. And there's extensive significance to that as well. Makes it the acronym itself makes it a power act. Yeah. I don't mean power in the world, power over others. Just an act in itself, one that's powerful. And this is how it breaks down. All right, man. I've done it. I've done it. I've done it now. I'm Theron, Ramacharaka. Man, an hour and a quarter long. Some people aren't going to look at this. If you have, good for you. Be well.